I still remember that night like it's stitched into my skin. The sound of the rain against the window, the low hum of the TV playing something I wasn't even watching, and the way the clock ticked a little too loud in that small, quiet house. I had this feeling in my chest that something was wrong, and I couldn't tell why. I just kept looking at my phone, waiting for it to light up. I kept thinking about him, my husband, Mark. He'd left that afternoon after an argument. Nothing big, just one of those stupid small fights that couples have. He was tired, I was moody, he said he needed air, and he just left. I watched him pull out of the driveway, and I didn't even say, "I love you." And that's the thing that eats at me every single day after. It must have been around midnight when the phone rang. I almost didn't pick it up. I was half asleep, but something made me grab it. The screen said, "Mark calling," and I remember smiling a little, like, okay, he's cooled down, he's coming home. But when I answered, all I heard was wind, heavy breathing, and static. I said, "Mark? Hey, Mark, where are you?" And then his voice came through, faint and broken, like he was struggling to talk. He said my name once, softly, like he was afraid to say it too loud. Then he whispered something I'll never forget. He said, "It was her." And then the line went dead. I remember staring at the screen, waiting for it to come back, but it didn't. I called back and it went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, each time my hands shaking harder until the phone almost slipped out of them. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to drive out and look for him, but where would I even go? We lived out on the edge of town, near the woods and the old highway. There wasn't much out there, just long stretches of dark road and silence. About 20 minutes later, I heard a knock at the door. It was firm, slow, like someone was trying not to scare me. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 police officers standing on the porch, their hats dripping from the rain, and my stomach just dropped. I didn't even need to open the door to know something was wrong. When I did open it, the younger officer looked at me with that kind of face you only see in movies when they have to give bad news. He asked if I was Mrs. Collins, and I nodded. I couldn't even speak. My throat was closing up. And then he said there'd been an accident out by Miller's Creek. A car had gone off the road into the ravine. They'd found my husband's wallet and phone inside, but they hadn't recovered a body yet. I remember everything after that like a blur. I followed them to the site. The rain never stopped the whole drive. And when we got there, the world looked like a painting, smudged and dark with flashing red and blue lights, the sound of the rain hitting the metal guardrail, and the way the fog hung low over the trees. The car was down there, twisted like paper, half submerged in water. I kept asking them to check again, to go down to make sure, but they kept telling me it was too dangerous. The current was strong, they said. They'd search in the morning. When I finally got home, the house felt colder than ever. I sat on the floor, still wearing my wet clothes, phone in hand, just staring at it. I replayed his last words over and over. It was her. Who was her? Who could he have meant? My mind went wild. Maybe he meant someone on the road. Maybe he saw something or someone and tried to avoid them. Or maybe it was something else, something darker. I barely slept that night. I kept hearing things outside. Little creaks, the wind moving branches, the faint sound of water dripping from the gutters. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, that smile he had. When he used to tease me, or the way he held my hand when we'd go walking through the orchard near the house, those little moments that felt ordinary then, but meant everything now. The next morning, I drove back to the crash site. They had the place taped off, but the rain had slowed and the fog was lifting. One of the officers let me look from the edge down at the water. The car was still there, mangled and dark. I could see the shattered windshield glinting faintly in the gray light. I wanted to climb down, but they stopped me. They said they'd get divers later that day. When I got home, again, I couldn't stand the silence. I started cleaning just to keep my hands busy. His mug was still on the counter, half full, his jacket on the chair. I picked up his phone charger from the nightstand, and that's when I saw it. A flash drive, half tucked under the lamp base. It wasn't mine, I knew that right away. He'd been using it recently, but never said what for. Curiosity got the better of me. I plugged it into my laptop and waited.
It took a few seconds, and then a single folder popped up, labeled Voices. Inside were 5 audio files, all named by dates. The most recent one was from the night before. I hesitated before pressing play. The first thing I heard was him, my husband, breathing heavily like he was out of breath. And then he said something that made my skin crawl. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. His voice was shaky, like he was terrified of something. I listened closer. He kept saying a name over and over, but the storm outside was too loud and it kept cutting in and out. It sounded like Mara or maybe Mary. I couldn't tell. I played the next file. It was recorded 2 nights before that one. This time, his tone was calmer. He was talking like he was documenting something. He said he'd been followed for a few days by a car with tinted windows. He thought it was someone from work. He worked at a small logistics firm, nothing special, but he'd mentioned a disagreement with one of his partners. I never thought much of it until now. By the time I finished all 5 files, my hands were shaking. I didn't understand everything, but I knew he was scared and hiding something. He didn't trust the people around him, and maybe not even me. That thought broke me. I felt sick, thinking he went through all that alone and didn't tell me. That evening, I drove out to his office just to see if anyone was there. It was closed, but the parking lot had one car still parked by the side, a dark gray sedan, the kind he'd mentioned in the recording. I sat there in my own car for a few minutes, heart pounding. The driver's seat was empty, that I could swear someone was watching from behind the blinds on the 2nd floor. When I got home, the power flickered a few times before going out completely. I lit a candle and sat by the window, trying to calm down. The rain had started again, and the air smelled like wet earth. I don't know why, but I opened his old drawer, the one he used for paperwork, and found an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a note written in his handwriting. It said, "If you're reading this, I'm sorry. I couldn't tell you sooner, but I had to protect you." I must have read that line 100 times, trying to understand. Protect me from what? The next line said, "You were right about her." And that's when my chest tightened, because I realized there really was someone else. He wasn't just being paranoid. Maybe that her he mentioned on the call wasn't random at all. Maybe it was someone he knew. Later that night, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate steps on the gravel driveway. I peeked through the curtain, but there was nothing, just the flickering porch lights swaying in the wind. I turned off the candlelight and sat in the dark, holding my phone like a weapon. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Maybe an hour, maybe more. The next morning, I went back to the police station and told them everything about the files, the note, the car at his office. They looked at me like I was losing my mind. One of them said they'd check the office camera footage, but it could take a few days. I left frustrated, but not surprised. That night, I listened to the last recording again. Something about the background noise caught my attention, a faint echo, like he was in a big, empty place. Then I heard it, a bell tolling softly in the distance. I knew that sound. It was the church bell near the old train yard, a place we hadn't been to in years. I grabbed my coat and drove out there. Even though it was late, the air was cold and heavy with fog. The old church sat half collapsed, its windows broken, its roof sagging. There was no one around, but I could hear something faint, like a phone ringing from somewhere inside. I followed the sound through the nave until I reached the altar, and there, on the ground, was a phone, buzzing, its screen cracked, water dripping onto it from the ceiling. It was his phone. I picked it up, and my reflection stared back at me through the shattered glass. I tried to unlock it, but it was dead, soaked from the rain. I sank to my knees, holding it against my chest, whispering his name like it could bring him back. I sat there until the ringing in my ears faded, replaced by silence, and then I felt it again, that presence, like someone else was there, watching me. I turned, but there was no one, just the echo of water drops and the whisper of wind through broken glass. I left quickly, my hands trembling too hard to even hold the keys steady. When I got home, I felt something different. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt aware, like it was holding its breath. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, though I should have been, but because I couldn't stop wondering why. Why would Mark go to that old church? Why did he sound so terrified in those recordings? And most of all, who was her? At around 3 a.m., I went back to my laptop. I rechecked the flash drive, clicking through folders I hadn't noticed before. Hidden inside the Voices folder was a small text document called Her File. It was only 3 sentences long. She isn't human. Don't trust the reflection. If she finds this, it's already too late. I stared at the words, half angry, half scared. It didn't make sense. Mark wasn't a man who believed in ghosts or supernatural nonsense. He was logical, grounded. For him to write something like that meant he truly believed it. The next morning, the police finally called. They said the divers had recovered the car, but there was no body inside. I didn't cry this time. I just felt empty. It was like grief had burned out every emotion I had left. Later that afternoon, I decided to clean again. It's strange how we do that, how cleaning gives the illusion of control when everything else falls apart. As I dusted the hallway mirror, I noticed something odd. My reflection lagged. It sounds crazy, I know. But for a second, I moved and she didn't. The reflection just stared at me, her lips parted, her expression colder than mine. Then it snapped back like a video glitch, and everything looked normal. I dropped the cloth and stepped back. My heart hammered against my ribs. I told myself it was just exhaustion, sleepless nights, too much caffeine, too much grief. But then I saw it again. At the corner of the mirror, faintly, something like a face behind mine. I covered the mirror with a blanket and backed away. Not a reflection, not me. A woman standing inside the mirror, pale, soaked in water, her hair floating like she was underwater. Her eyes were open but black, her lips moving soundlessly. The candlelight flickered, and she smiled. I stumbled backward and ran for the door, but the knob wouldn't turn. It felt ice cold under my hand. The house itself felt alive, vibrating with something that wasn't real. Then I heard Mark's voice from the hallway. He whispered my name, just like he had on the phone that night. I turned, and there he was. Or at least something that looked like him. His clothes were wet, his skin pale, but his eyes, they weren't his eyes. They were dark, just like hers. He reached out a hand and said, "You shouldn't have listened to the files." I screamed and stumbled back. The next thing I remember, the mirror shattered, and I woke up hours later on the floor, surrounded by glass. The house was quiet again. The clock ticked like nothing had happened. But the mirror, the shards didn't reflect me. They reflected her. I packed a bag that night and drove until sunrise, past the edge of town, past Miller's Creek. I stopped at a small motel and stayed there for days. Every night, I'd see her again. In the bathroom mirror, in a window reflection, in the glass of my phone screen. She never spoke, just stared. One morning, I got a message on Mark's number. It said only, "You can't run from your reflection." I threw the phone into the motel sink and smashed it. For a while, I thought I had escaped, but then, last week, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small photograph. It was me standing at the window of my old house. Only I hadn't been there in months. And behind me, in the reflection of the glass, was her.